Hello, good morning and welcome to the newspaper show with me, Varun Hiremat. Before we go any further today, let's remind you that the newspaper is completely safe. There's a lot of rumors circulating about viruses being transmitted through touching the newspapers. That's absolutely false. All personnel at the presses are using the proper sanitary measures, wearing PPE, so there's really no concern. If you are interested in getting a newspaper delivered to your house, go to wantmypaper.com where you can explore the various arrangements for the same. With that being said, let's now move on and get you the top headlines from this morning's paper, beginning with the fact that May turns out to be a better month as factories restart. So that's a key development coming in there. Next one is flights to be at pre-COVID levels by Diwali. That's Hardeep Singh Puri coming forward and saying that he thinks we'll be back to regular air traffic by around Diwali time. 2 government panels want lockdown lifted, so that's quite self-explanatory. Maharashtra should open up, says Pawar. That's again self-explanatory. PayTM in talks for Grofers stake. So this is quite interesting. Seems that PayTM is going to make an acquisition or looking to make an acquisition in the grocery space and delivery space. Grofers stake is being eyed there. Talking about stake sales and all that's happening in telecom, with Reliance repeatedly having its stake sales and Airtel, we now have Vodafone coming up as well, saying that Google might be looking to pick up a 5% stake in Vodafone Idea. Now, only 100 school days model in the works currently. SC states that the states must feed migrant and pay fare. So that's another key development coming in from the Supreme Court. Then Trump directs social media clampdown. That's again quite self-explanatory, and one wonders whether he might start tweeting less himself. And then the IMD sticks to June 5th onset of the monsoon. So the IMD had predicted that it would be hitting Kerala, the monsoon would, on the 5th of June, and they stand by their previous guidance. Let's now get you a feel for the top 5 corporate stories this morning. RIL Retail arm sent exit notice to Nexus. So that's obviously in the downturn. A lot of these Reliance brands are having issues. Softbank Bharti JV looks to raise $750 million US. So that's another key story to keep an eye out for. 10% of CV dealers may have to shut shop. This is very interesting. It seems the CV cycle has been hit badly and that CV retailers might be looking at closing down their doors. BookMyShow furloughs 270 employees, quite self-explanatory, and we've been seeing a whole host of corporates doing this. And finally, from the corporates angle, Motilal Oswal offers bonuses and promotions. So that's quite contrary to everything else we're hearing and good for the Motilal employees. Now, the top 5 market stories of this morning that will also lead to stocks that you need to look out for are again the RIL topping the global share sale chart this year. So all over the globe, RIL seems to have raised the most money. Traders carry bullish bets into June. So as one of my colleagues, Jayesh, was flagging off yesterday, traders seem quite optimistic about June. Wall Street climbs on tech and healthcare push. Excuse me. So if you're looking at the US indices and wondering what's really driving their rally while we struggle here, it seems to be that tech and healthcare is what's doing that. RBI fines Bank of India, Saraswat Co-op Bank and Karnataka banks. So there's some regulator action coming in there. And then slips further on US-China tension. So there's a lot of US-China tension right now. We know Trump is going to have a conference tomorrow regarding his opinion on what China is currently doing in Hong Kong. So that'll also be a key thing to look out for. But coming back to the main story of this morning and the top page of the newspaper about factories reopening in May, my colleague Poonam is now with us. Good morning, Poonam. Welcome to the show. Walk us through this, what it means, how much better is the situation in May than it was in April and March?
Well, there's certainly good news around the corner. We're seeing some amount of activity pick up in the month of May. According to the CII ground report, we are seeing improvement in terms of the e-way bill generation. That does indicate a better improved goods transportation. We're also seeing an improvement in terms of the consumption of power and fuel. However, CII report does still mention that the activity is still just around 1/4 of the pre-COVID period. North and East regions are certainly functional, along with, however, there are certain key restrictions out there. If you look at the factories across Gujarat to Orissa, most of the factories have already resumed operations, although partially. We are still seeing key cities like Mumbai, Pune as well as Nagpur still under lockdown or restrictions, and we need to watch out for the pickup in activity going ahead, because as the lockdown does open up, we may see improved activity. However, there's still labor shortages, and that would be the key to recovery. There are still there's most of the key cities are still under lockdown or in red zones, and the flattening of the COVID curve would be another key factor to be watched out for.
All right, Poonam, thanks for sharing those details with us. One just piece of good news there is it seems that a lot of the migrant workers are returning, I believe, slowly but surely. Switching gears a little bit, the Home Ministry's empowerment groups are done with lockdown. They feel that it's not necessary to have an extension on the current lockdown, and they believe that only certain sections need to be closed. This is again on the front page of the paper. It's right below the story Poonam was just talking about, and it's quite key. According to these groups, they think that schools, movie halls, religious places, they can be kept shut as they invite a mass gathering of people. But other than that, they believe that people should be allowed to roam around, and only the worst hit areas should maintain their lockdown status, and you should see a gradual opening up in the rest. This is just one group expressing what they feel. Obviously, now as we come up to our official lockdown extension ending date, we'll be keen to hear from the Prime Minister's office or the Prime Minister himself as to exactly what the new rules and protocols for Lockdown 5.0 will be, and whether these groups will receive any reprieve or not. But switching gears again, keeping it with the lockdown, we're exploring the CV space. Now, the CV dealers are currently in dire straits. Given that there's been a huge drop in economic activity, there's barely any logistics or transport movement, and your commercial vehicle sales have really taken a hit on the back of this. Now, all of you know that without any revenue coming in, it becomes very hard to support your operating cost, no matter which industry you are, whether you're a mutual fund, a retailer, Reliance brands, even your CV dealers are having a similar plight. So it now seems that if you do a ground floor survey, 10% of CV retailers are actually looking at closing their doors permanently up until demand revives itself. So that's quite a key development. Let's remember our economy hinges very heavily on the CV cycle, so it'll definitely be a key monitorable going forward. But switching gears a little bit to technology in the telecom space, Vodafone has been absent from all the fundraisers we're seeing in the sector. Today, for the first time in the newspaper, again on the front page, lower down, you have the fact that Google might be looking at a 5% stake in this company. It's raising a lot of questions. Why Vodafone? Why not Bharti, a much healthier company? Why not RIL? But my colleague Sunita Nagpal is now with us to walk us through this, what it means for Vodafone. Is it likely? Good morning, Sunita. Welcome to the show. Take it away.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to point out that the report suggests that these talks are at preliminary stage, and the report also points out that Google is not only in talks with Vodafone, but also with Jio. So it's too early to say which way this will go. But if Vodafone, the news report says that 5% stake might be picked up in Vodafone. This will not be enough for solving problems that Vodafone has been facing. You know, they are sitting on a very huge, large debt of roughly about 10,000 crore rupees. Problem will not solve. But having said that, a backing of Google picking up even if a 5% stake at this juncture would mean that the questions that were raised will be forward. Asia had to comment. There were more questions raised that with their financial position, whether they will be able to survive. And even Vodafone Inc. had said that they will not be on Vodafone Idea. The problems will be taken care of if a backing like Google comes in. Having said that, these are our very, very preliminary stage talks. If the deal happens, it will be very great for Vodafone, and the questions raised on its survival will, those questions will disappear.
All right. Thank you so much, Sunita, for joining us this morning. And there you heard it. It seems that this fundraise won't be enough to really solve Idea's issues, but it'll definitely point them in the right direction and recreate the investor confidence that they'll be able to survive. Thanks again for that, Sunita. Switching gears a little bit. Softbank Bharti JV looking to raise 750 million. So this is a renewable JV. SBG Cleantech is to reach out to investors to raise capital, and they plan to fund ongoing and pipeline projects in India and the US. So do keep an eye out for that. Another pretty key story this morning that we'll be discussing, again on the front page, we haven't really moved off there today, is the fact that PayTM might be looking for a stake in Grofers. Now this is again report based, very much like the previous story that Sunita was just talking about on Vodafone, so it's all based on the paper. It seems that even a merger might be on the cards, so not an all-right acquisition, but even a merger. Softbank, a common investor in PayTM and Grofers, is the party that's actually initiated the talks. And my colleague Chandra is now joining us with all the details regarding this story. Good morning, Chandra. Over to you. Okay. It seems that Chandra has been unable to join us this morning, but what I briefly told you about kind of covers it, and do have a read if you're interested in the story. It's on the front page. Another key story this morning involving Reliance, right? And yet again, this is again on the front page. A lot of smaller stories on the front page today. So it seems that Reliance Retail has actually exited some of its leases in the Nexus malls that are owned by Blackstone. These leases were currently occupied by Reliance brands owned entities, and it seems that based on the lockdown impact and the lack of sales, again here, paying your outgoings is becoming a real issue. And on the back of that, we've seen a lot of exits, and we'll be waiting to hear more on that as the story progresses. So keep an eye out for that one as well. Now moving forward, China's parliament, China and Hong Kong, they're having a bit of an issue, and the US is very keen in understanding how China is treating this. Now, the Chinese parliament has approved the decision to move forward with the national security legislation for Hong Kong. The National People's Congress on Thursday voted 2,878 to 1 in favor of the decision to empower its standing committee to draft the legislation with 6 abstentions. So it's quite interesting. Donald Trump will be talking about this issue tomorrow. He's come out and said that, so do keep an eye on it. Now coming back domestically here to our CM Amit Shah, 3 days before the 4th phase of the nationwide lockdown comes to an end, Union Home Minister Amit Shah spoke to all the chief ministers to discuss the current situation, their views on extending the lockdown and the future strategy to fight the pandemic. Joining us now from Times Now, my colleague who's covering this very closely. Let's listen in. Okay, well, again, it seems that we don't have my colleague present who was going to walk us through what happened, but I'm sure you got the gist of it. Now, there's going to be a couple of reads coming up, so bear with me. The next thing we're going to talk about is vaccines. At least 6 local vaccine candidates with 30 groups are trying to develop a vaccine for COVID-19. Every country has got its own set of leading pharma companies that are working on a solution. Now, 10 drugs are currently being repurposed by the pharma companies for the treatment of the underlying virus, and the nation's effort as a collective community in combating the novel coronavirus. So some of these drugs are favipiravir, remdesivir, hydroxychloroquine. So they're all under various stages of trials, and we're just flagging it off because it was in the newspaper today, and we'll be able to update you as and when we keep getting more results from these trials. Now switching gears a little bit, Dorsey hits back on a fact check. So as Twitter fact-checked US President Trump's tweets, CEO Jack Dorsey hit back sharply at US President Trump, asserting that the microblogging site would continue to point out incorrect or disputed information about elections globally. So that's quite interesting. This move comes ahead of Trump signing an executive order aimed at regulating online platforms and taking away some of the legal protections they enjoy. So quite a tussle going on there, and quite interesting. Now, change in school model is the next thing we have to talk about this morning. The Union HRD Ministry is working to overhaul the in-school study model with 50% of home classes. So now 50% of the children will be learning from home. Not more than 30 to 50% of students are expected to attend, and there'll be a weekly timetable system with 30-minute periods advised. Now, in its guidelines, the ministry will lay special focus on disadvantaged children and children with special needs to help them adapt to the new format of learning. So that's something interesting coming in from the education sphere. Now, we're almost nearing the end of our show this morning. Let's get you the top 5 headlines from the Times of India, and and this is also obviously related to COVID to a certain extent. India is the 9th most COVID-hit nation, and cases are up by 6,926. Maharashtra cases are set to cross 60,000, and the deaths in Maharashtra alone are set to cross 2,000. Airlines, 18 flyers who flew in the last 3 days test positive. Now you gotta wonder how many people they might have made contact with. Realty is a worry. That's what Pawar is telling the PM. That story we spoke about earlier. Do have a read. And the government says that there's no room for a third-party issue on China, or a third-party view on the China issue. So that's what our government has to say regarding that. A quick quote for you this morning as part of our ET Q&A. By Diwali in November, we will have all of our 650 aircraft operated by Indian carriers flying. This may sound optimistic, but what else are we going to do? We need to revive the economic activity in the country, and extending the lockdown could be more devastating for the country than COVID. That's what Hardeep Singh Puri, the Aviation Minister, had to say. My colleague Poonam is just back with us right now because we haven't really touched upon the story in enough detail. Factories opening in May is a huge trigger, and it's a huge change from what we've seen in March and April. So welcome back, Poonam. Nice to have you with us again. Could you walk us through the highlights of this story again?
Well, there's certainly good news around the corner. We're seeing some amount of activity pick up in the month of May. According to the CII ground report, we are seeing improvement in terms of the e-way bill generation. That does indicate a better improved goods transportation. We're also seeing an improvement in terms of the consumption of power and fuel. However, CII report does still mention that the activity is still just around 1/4 of the pre-COVID period. North and East regions are certainly functional, along with, however, there are certain key restrictions out there. If you look at the factories across Gujarat to Orissa, most of the factories have already resumed operations, although partially. We are still seeing key cities like Mumbai, Pune as well as Nagpur still under lockdown or restrictions, and we need to watch out for the pickup in activity going ahead, because as the lockdown does open up, we may see improved activity. However, there's still labor shortages, and that would be the key to recovery. There are still most of the key cities are still under lockdown or in red zones, and the flattening of the COVID curve would be another key factor to be watched out for.